joining. For our Engage webinar this time around, we always like to think about a little bit of the future in this lens being a little bit more short-termist than maybe perhaps a lot of other people like to do so. So that's thinking really into 2024, which is just around the corner. One of the reasons it's a good time to do so is because, of course, you're all engaged in planning for next year, if it's not already done. And also, having just been to SupplySide West in Vegas, a lot of the questions that people tend to ask when we're there are, so what did you see? What was new? What do you think was innovative? And of course, most people tend to answer that in the same way, by almost being a little bit more pessimistic with regards to thinking that they didn't see anything new. There wasn't too much to see as such. And actually, my proposition on this specifically is very much to say that actually things at shows like that don't suddenly appear and it's super new and shiny. They are evolving as time goes on. And so things are typically appearing in front of our face. So what is today all about? Well, of course, it's about what I believe is happening into 2024. So ultimately, is it trends or is it the evolution of what we're seeing? I don't have a magic ball, but I think what I really want to do is stimulate debate and help you to cut through some of the noise. It's a very cluttered market out there for brands and for ingredient suppliers. I actually think the trends are pretty obvious. It doesn't take a genius to say that women's health is at the forefront of people's talking points. Don't think it takes a genius to say that the gut microbiome or the microbiome in general is an important area. Delivery systems, some technology, etc. And I think what we've got to try and do is separate self-perpetuated industry narrative. What do we just want to talk about because that's what we're selling versus what we think is really happening at a consumer level. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is 10 trends that I believe are influencing the market. But instead of just saying, hey, the world is about plant or something, my view is to try and be a little bit more alternative in the way that I describe those and try and get to the heart of what it is that something that is being successful. Why are they winning? And I'm going to put those into context for you shortly and talk about what they really mean. There's some really interesting things going on, and I'm going to do that through the lens of actually successful brands, because what happens in our industry is people see successful brands and they look to emulate them. That doesn't mean to say they should copy them. It just means what we should do is learn what it is that they've done in order to be successful. So as we go through this presentation, what you'll find is I'm going to make reference to brands along the way for the purposes of helping you understand, that's what it is about them that might be successful. So just to get straight in, our 2023 lens, so what we presented at the beginning of the year actually looked like this. And there's two layers to this. At the top, we call them the brand and product. So what do all sort of next generation brands need to take into account? And I firmly believe that a lot of these should have defined everything that most sort of brands do, but also anybody within the brand B2B environment. So there is a huge scope for proactive nutrition. That's my interpretation of active nutrition. So, a highly sensitized group of consumers who want to be healthier. Engineered naturalness. Naturalness is in the eye of the beholder. So products that present themselves to be more natural, but I think consumers are happy to be engineered in that front. So I think that opens the door for things like precision fermentation. Sustainability is pretty obvious. Memorable experience is all about format, taste, visual identity. It can also be about technology. It can also be about hardware. So what supports the product? Products. It's not about selling products these days. It's about selling product experiences. And that's the way great products are shared online and how brands build phenomenal traction. One size doesn't fit all is, of course, about technology. And some brands still struggle with what that could look like. Others are a little bit more forward thinking. Now, at a category, a population, or a need level, 5 things that I'd said in 2023 were a gut feeling. I think it's pretty straightforward that the microbiome is a pretty big area. Brain first, the way that the brain has broadened out into sort of 4 major need states to energize the brain, the functioning of the brain, the balance of the brain, and the regeneration of the brain, aka energy, cognition, mood, and sleep, are the four areas that are typically manifesting themselves into important products. Biological-based nutrition is all about male health and also women's health, which was very much at the forefront of communications last week in Vegas. Convenient food, I think, is pretty straightforward in terms of the growth of certain brands that have redefined something there, and a virtual world which aligned itself to gaming and so on. Now, if I just press on, I'm going to say that looking into 2024 and beyond, on the assumption that everything that was there at the beginning of the year is all still relevant, but for the purposes of not repeating myself, which is also a little bit of a cheat thing to do, I've actually reviewed a lot of what's going on, because we're tracking nearly 10,000 brands across Europe and North America, and a lot of those in the finest of product details, to look at things like this. So what we're really interested in a brand and product level, and I'm going to show you a slide on every single one of them, is I believe what brands are going to do and continue to do is redefine and reimagine products that have existed for a very long time, but they're going to repurpose them for today's consumer. And so people are sometimes looking for things they've never seen before, whereas innovation typically comes from stuff that actually we go, God damn it, we've actually seen that before. That's just a really clever way of bringing that to life. Ownership. Brands own things, and I don't think now brands can ever be a jack of all and not a master of any. So what you really need to do, and I think a lot of the brands that are coming through that are creating the noise and the success of platforms for the future, is they've really very much demonstrate something ownable. Now, in many respects, people think about that as going, oh, well, that's just a USP. What's your USP? Blah, blah, blah. It needs to be a little bit more serious than that. Brands holistically now are owning propositions, and that is demonstrating authenticity, credibility, and expertise in a particular area that consumers find believable. 360-degree health is very much around the way that brands are not just owning something, but they're appreciating the interlink or the benefit connectivity of multiple areas. And how it relates to their ownership territory. And I'll explain that in more ways. Breaking the taboo, it's about the quality of the conversation. So people are breaking traditional taboos of silence, of where consumers have possibly suffered previously, and are looking to be more proactive about their approach. And product and beyond is so exciting for a lot of people, but does stress the internal capability of many brands. And that's basically saying, yeah, we sell a product, but what else around that will help build the habits and behaviors of consumers to consume that product on an ongoing basis. That could, again, of course, be technology. That's the obvious way. Sometimes it's hardware and so on. At a population or category need level, the five that I'm going to go into are generational energy. It's easy to say energy and energy drinks, but the reality is energy is permeating everybody across the life cycle. And so actually understanding where you want to play along that life cycle, depending on where it's relevant for energy, is going to be a really key area, because that is what keeps people and the world going round. People are used to saying healthy body, healthy mind. I actually think now it's very much healthy mind, healthy body, in more ways than one. And that's impacting both aesthetics and aging in many different things. So the brain and the way that the brain is influencing so many different brands is actually quite incredible, really. And so for a brand or a supplier not to have competency or a view on the brain would be probably an oversight, let's say. Agelessness, yeah, you could say it's active aging, but agelessness is very much underpinning a number of key areas. And it's starting people off. I'd put myself in that bracket. I don't think I'm quite old yet, but agelessness is very much what people are searching for. Digital impact, that's nothing to do with gaming for the time being, although I will sort of touch upon it slightly. Digital impact is, we're all sat in front of a computer right now. So as our lives take on a more digital footprint, what impact does that have on our health, our movement, our mobility? And actually, one of the areas that I'm really interested in there that doesn't sound too sexy if I just write down eye health is just the fact that I think that will become a really important area. And it's very much really coming down to the fact that a digital footprint on our life is impacting health in a number of ways. And actually, that might be there in line back to how you redefine and reimagine brands and propositions. And finally, foundational health. Consumers only really consume one or two products in any one day for the purposes of a repertoire, unless they're a super hardcore consumer. And so more so than ever, brands are looking for something that they believe feels foundational, so they get the best or maximum buck for it. And there's some really good examples of that. I'm going to take you through them one by one, and hopefully that will give you some cause for discussion. Now, if I was to think about redefining and reimagining, probably one of the best areas that I think people could look at is, let's say, Huel and Grenade in this instance. Now, my purpose here is very much to say that we have a really stable ecosystem of ingredients, benefits, and formats. So yes, there can be some innovation. Of course, there's innovation in new things we haven't seen before, particularly in certain delivery systems, maybe. But what we've seen with Huel, could be Soylent in the US a few years earlier, Y-Food in Germany that's doing very well, is effectively they took something in the constructs of a meal replacement and they redefined it for a different purpose. Dead simple on paper, everyone now wants to copy it, and so on. They've also taken what would be of a traditional sort of hot and savory meal, where, you know, previously people would have seen that as a cheat or would have seen that as eating unhealthily. And really what they've done is turned that on its head and said, no, if you're doing that, you're super proactive. And if you engage with us, then you're buying a healthy choice. And really what they've done is they've done something quite incredible, which is to redefine and reimagine products that have existed for quite some time, albeit, of course, they're modernized. Grenade took a protein bar that was a delivery of function, and they've turned it into better for you chocolate, not least by the fact they've now been acquired by Mondelez, and they've already got brand collaborations with Oreo, which is taking it into a different area of better for you chocolate bars. Other good examples, I think, in the US are Olipop redefining soda through the lens of prebiotic fiber. And you're also seeing the classic energy powders of pre-workout redefining themselves into gaming, and not being not being too dissimilar. And I think what we're actually finding is, honestly, the world evolves in front of our eyes. So people are taking things that have happened before, and what they're realizing is they can do it better, different, or they can repurpose it. And I think what we'll continually find is that brands that will cut through, they will redefine and reimagine something that has existed for quite some time. And I think that is going to be a key principle for success moving forward. Now, in terms of ownership, as people try to cut through the fact that there's a million different myriads of health, so liver health, heart health, muscle health, heart, joint health, and so on, health ... as such, instead of being a master of all, a jack of all, let's say, what brands are typically trying to do now is to show ownership. So there's not a lot of time or room for brands to do everything. Similarly, consumers don't want brands to do everything, and they don't believe it is actually relevant to them. And so in today's world, consumers are looking for brands that own something. So the way you look around now, we have brands that are going in and owning the brain. We've got brands like Seed in the US owning the microbiome. We've got brands that are authentically gaming only. Now, yes, a sports nutrition brand at its top level is a sports nutrition brand, but you know, over a time, they tend to devalue what they own by trying to go into so many different areas. Now, the key thing here is that as people build this, you'll have brands that own women's health, Hims, Sons, and so on. There's ones that own men's health. And actually what we're seeing is, as brands are looking to cut through and create platforms, they're a way to disrupt the really big players in dietary supplements and active nutrition is very much to own something, penetrate, and then think like hell, what comes next? And so for Heights, who own Brain Health, of which they've only two products, one that's very much about brain health based around blueberries. Then they've launched the gut brain access type product that they've also brought to life. They're owning their brain, and they're owning the relationship to the trend of mental health and the fact that probably anywhere between 50 to 70% of people are registering quite high on levels of depression and stress. Similarly, anybody who goes into the areas of the gut, they will find something similar in terms of people who are having signs and symptoms of something that they want to find a solution to. So brands are increasingly owning something. And when you look at the brands that are winning, this is a key principle. And in some instances, they're very much democratizing and redefining. Brands are also learning within their area of ownership to appreciate that an ownership level doesn't need to be one-dimensional. So to some extent, whilst Heights own the brain, they've also appreciated that there's a 360-degree opportunity to own products directly on the brain and cognition, but then they've gone downstream into the other end of the axis and gone into the microbiome. Similarly, if you take It's April here, which is a brand focused entirely on women's health, what you'll actually find is that they have products specifically focused on PMS. They've also got products very much focused on vaginal health. Now, those two areas are very much key platforms within a traditional architecture for women's health. You could add pregnancy or pre or post, and also menopause for a slightly older female. But what they're also showing is, for women's health, they're tapping into the empathy of the consumers that are also a little bit stressed throughout their periods. They also have a connection to poor skin health at certain points in the month. They're also realizing that they feel run down and have heightened risk of coughs, colds, flus, and infections, or upper respiratory tract infections. And they're also tapping into the fact that many female consumers talk about low energy or a lack of energy or lethargy, tiredness, and fatigue that relates to the key challenges that they face around the menstrual cycle or menopause. What's the point? Brands are realizing that health isn't one-dimensional. So when you say women's health, you can't just talk in the context of 2 or 3 things that feel specifically about women's health. That's fine. But really, brands and consumers are trying to build the relationship whereby there's greater empathy to what actually is happening throughout that process. So there is a challenge regarding anything to do with women's health directly, but there is a secondary challenge around things around the brain and around skin and around immunity, which are very much authentic to include in the ecosystem of products and their portfolio, but is also recognizing that health is not one-dimensional. Now, women's health becomes quite a good example of this, but others include weight management and the fact that weight management stresses people's energy. It also stresses their mood. So you'll see that brain has a very strong connection in sort of feeling around a number of platforms. And also, you've even got interesting areas like sports nutrition and aesthetics, where actually quite a lot of brands sell products related to aesthetics because that's the core aspect of sports nutrition. But you're also seeing things like the weathering. So people who go out and exposed to outdoor activity during endurance activities, engaging in aesthetic products through the lens of trying not to be so weathered on the skin. And what I'm trying to say is that there's always a primary benefit for a particular population or need, but there's always a secondary empathetic where those consumers are also have adjacencies that become really interesting in their sort of their bubble. And so the whole purpose of brands delving into 360-degree health, but still under the premise of some form of ownership, is a real skill. And you're going to see more and more people, and that's how brands are going to build on their redefined and reimagined propositions. Within that, they're also going to break the taboo. So one of the things that I've talked about a lot is that this is about real problems and offering real solutions. So a typical approach, let's just say through the lens of the gut, it becomes really bland. People go, let's go mainstream. And they just go, hey, healthy body, healthy mind. What they're missing is the fact that a lot of these consumers genuinely have sort of suffered in silence. And they've not had conversation or community. And on the flip side now, in 2023, moving into 2024, they are looking for conversation and they are looking for communities of people, whether that's people through the lens of menopause or gut challenges, and it could be in particular other areas as well. And so they're looking for brands that are looking to engage in conversations, communities, facilitate the conversation, and to actually break the taboo on this so that it doesn't feel like a suffer in silence type scenario. And actually, what's really interesting is women's health is at the core of this, mental health is at the core of this, gut health is at the core of this, and also skin disorders is at the core of it. And if you look at some of the statistics on the chart, then these are just some that relate into different European countries, but 58% suffer from gut health, 76% suffer moderate to high stress, 75% will suffer significantly, and menopause hits all females, with symptoms, and then actually a huge amount of people suffer from serious acne, not just spots. And the point is, people want to find solutions and not sort of find them in secret. They want to find them in an openness of a community that breaks the taboo that these should not be things that should be in silence anymore, and so on. And so brands, and I think even ingredient suppliers, can facilitate this. It's all about facilitating a community and a thread of thought that breaks the taboo of these traditional areas. At the same time, I think even in sport, you can break the taboo of what protein could do, and it doesn't just make you huge. And I think in any other areas, you can break the taboo, and that's going to be an important part of where brands will go. And then finally, the product and beyond. I actually listened to a really interesting sort of podcast with the founder of Waterdrop, which is now 100 million euros in excess of in Germany, and then in Europe, that is, and they've just made their major launch into the US, is that a huge part of their success is not the fact that they created a micro drink, which they would be upset if I just said it's an effervescent, but in simple terms, it's an effervescent that drops into water, flavors it, and adds some botanicals or some, I guess, additional benefits. What they've really done is they've created a product experience, because when you look at some of the reviews and the influencers, they all talk about how beautiful it is when it turns up, but they also talk about how beautiful it is to have what is a sustainable, and it's a glass bottle that comes with it, to which you get a customizable choice, and there's different options to it. And so what they did was, whilst the mission of Waterdrop is just to get more people drinking water, they realized that you can't just have a product. You have to facilitate the fact that that product needs to be made in some form of hardware. And you want to make that iconic, and you want to make it such that people want to tell others that they've got it. And in fact, many people go to Waterdrop to buy the water bottle as much as they do the product. It's just that they come hand in hand. So really, again, in 24 onwards, you're going to see more and more product platforms that find what the product is and what's the beyond adjacency. Now, that could be hardware. There's really great examples of that increasingly becoming technology. And I think it's also going into the B2B environment. And so there's some really interesting brands. I spent some time with a company called Salus Optima last week, where effectively they're providing the technology solutions within a B2B environment, so that the B2B company can take their ingredients with a secondary technology platform to help influence consumers. Honestly, moving forward, you can't just sell a product and hope it flies. Increasingly, you have to sell an experience, and that experience is going to be dimensionally beyond just the nutrition. But it's central to that is about what is it within that secondary experience that influences the behavior of how consumers take it on a daily basis. At a brand level, that's tricky in itself, but it's going to be interesting to see how many B2B people also take that on. So think about that, product and beyond. How do you drive something that aids the stickiness of why someone should consume your product, whilst also driving the habits and the behaviors of why, or getting it into people's daily routine? So redefine and reimagine, own something, build the 360 around it. What was after that? Break the taboo in the conversation and think about the product platform and the full product experience that might take you beyond the nutritional product on the experience per se. Now, in terms of the 5 areas for category population in need, the first one is generational energy. Again, this isn't something that should surprise you. It's just a reminder that actually what you've got in energy is a really interesting lifespan approach. So on the right-hand side, you've got energy in sport. At the vertical, you've got energy in a younger demographic. So it's not just about gaming per se, it's about the younger generation. You've got a a universe of population of people looking for energy throughout the day that keeps them on their, that keeps them effectively feeling like they can optimize what they need to do in terms of life and work balance. And then you've got this whole aspect of people within the work scenario that are looking to either prevent tiredness and fatigue, or they're looking to try and be optimal at best, the whole limitless solution. So I think energy and performance is becoming a much broader application. The workforce is an primary area for it. And it's about everyone looking to be at their best. So I think energy can channel straight into energy drinks, to which that's a particular area. But generationally, I don't know anybody at any age, even the young, although that's a different sort of group for us, right the way through to the end, doesn't want or need some form of solution around staying stimulated and energized throughout the day. It is a mental marathon, as someone said to me the other day. Every day is a mental marathon. And so I think you're going to continue to see. Now, energy drinks is really strong. I actually think you're going to see more and more of those energy powders like gaming moving into this space. And I think you're already seeing the likes of Sneak demonstrate that they're not a gaming brand, quote unquote. They're trying to be an energy brand, albeit for a younger generation. And the key one there is going to be trying to find that middle generation and what they're going to best consume. Mind over body. The more I look at brands and the more I look at where everyone's going, is they're appreciating the power of the brain and how it influences every other need state. In women's health, it becomes around energy to provide, to offset lethargy, mood to manage stress and anxiety. In this instance, instead of saying healthy body, healthy mind, I think people are saying, if I've got a healthy mind, I'll have a healthy body. And I think that fits into this whole idea of active aging and the relationship with the brain. Similarly, in aesthetics, it's not about look good to feel good. That's actually quite a superficial way of approaching it. It's actually about feeling good to look good, and it changing the sort of flip side of the perception. If you look at the brands, and the It's April is a great example, you're going to see energy, cognition, mood, and sleep almost penetrate every population. It's going to populate most other health benefits on the basis that it becomes relevant to everybody. And so that's going to be a key dynamic. And it's very much a reframing of the dynamic. And so it's very much around that sort of whole area of the brain. And it really is an evolution from that whole brain first that I started with. Agelessness. I think there's two big areas here. It's about actually starting at the top of this curve rather than waiting until you're old. So I think it's about a younger generation starting earlier. And probably the biggest thing that you're seeing with agelessness is this whole growth around collagen and skin and aesthetics, which isn't new. But what you're seeing is it's not about collagen and skin. It's about people's desire to be ageless. And with ageless comes other areas such as, actually, do you dare to age differently? In the US, I think they can see there's a few callers who are from the US on this call. Then you'll be familiar with the growth of cellular health. Now, cellular health is something that hasn't really truly manifested its way into Europe yet. There's a few brands and a few executions. But if you look at the things like the NAD products, there's a hobamine from TSI, there's a few other ingredients moving around the place. There's beautiful brands like Science Research Wellness, which have cornered very premium to a certain group of people that have disposable income, by the way, with good looking brands basically saying, do you want to age differently? Now, there's some very extremes interpretations of this in terms of some influencers to which you may or may not follow. But the premise here is the fact that actually at the heart of all of this, to which collagen is also inherently linked, is the fact that people's desire to be ageless. So you can call it active aging if you want, but you're missing the empathy and the connection with the consumer. And people want to feel and be rewarded or be sort of communicated by someone saying, hey, you look great. And actually, they'll then put that back into what they're doing to age differently. And so, again, it doesn't have to be collagen, it doesn't have to be cellular health. It could be a few other things, but this could be one area where I think you might see some more reframing and reimagining of existing products, but under the lens of agelessness. Two more to go, and then we're pretty much on our 30-minute slot, which is what we like to keep to. Digital impact. So one thing that I think isn't sexy is to go, I think eye health is really important. As it happens, then you get a recognition at a scientific level and at a World Health Organization level of computer vision syndrome, digital eye strain, video game vision, and then even getting to the extent where gaming disorder being included in the next version of the World Health Organization classification of diseases. You can gamify it as well in terms of the tests. I think eye health is not sexy, but I actually firmly believe someone will make it emotionally relevant to a lot of people beyond its already reasonable size and scale commercially as it stands at the moment. And most people don't want to put something as simple as this on a trends or where areas to follow. But if you look at actually the digital impact of our lives, it's not just eye health, it'll be mobility and other areas. And again, it's actually the indirect impact of the way lives are changing is going to change the way we'll reinterpret health. And so actually, yes, gaming and video game vision is easy to write. Yes, eye health, I think, is going to be something. And we've already seen a lot of energy powders, particularly in the gaming market, launched now more with things like lutein in than any other ingredient. So we're already seeing it in product launches. The bigger thought here is this is about the impact of digital or digitization on our lives. And so whatever we see as the negative impact of digitization, and that'll be to do with movement, posture, some sort of mobility type things, I think, but other areas like eye health also comes back to the brain, so concentration, fatigue, lethargy, things like that will all come back to a digital that comes back to the impact of digitization. And so actually, when you reframe that, I think there's a lot of interesting areas you'll see brands move into. And actually, it's to do with this. And I don't doubt in any way that you'll see more media attention talk about this moving forward. Finally, foundational health, and there's no better example of, I guess, Athletic Greens taking a product that to all intents and purposes doesn't taste particularly good in terms of greens and basically calling it foundational nutrition. Now, when you put this into perspective, and I'm not saying anyone should copy this, I mean, I do think more and more people will find a different lens to superfoods, but there are also the good examples of mushrooms and things like that going into coffees and those combinations. There's a lot of sort of foundational stuff going on. So how can nutrition influence your foundational nutritional habits? How can nutrition talk about the benefits being foundational to the importance of health over time? Consumers, certainly for health, only consume 1 or 2 products in a daily repertoire. It's probably not even one if you were to take the average. So they're looking for products that have the biggest bang for their buck. They're looking for products that have the maximum impact. If you look at Athletic Greens, if you look at Huel, what they've effectively done is create foundational products. This is a foundational one. It basically says if you have one thing in your life, have this, because everyone can think through the lens of going, well, that's fruits, vegetables, pre's and pros, stuff for the gut, stuff for everything. It's almost the glorified all-in-one. Convenient food is all about saying you're going to get your macronutrients and your micronutrients when you can't get them. They're foundational. And actually, that's why they've had success, because when you're foundational, it's more relevant to more people. The more niche you are, the more niche the benefit, or the more niche the number of people who will engage with you. And so I think there's going to be this race to see who can come up with the next foundational health type proposition. Now, if I was to go into a dietary supplements world and think, where is the area that I'd put money on it being foundational? I actually think it'll come back down to the cellular health, because I actually think over time, as people understand it, they'll get into that sort of sphere of thinking that is a foundational way of supplementing. If you cover that, then upstream, everything starts to fall into place. I'm not a scientist, and I'm certainly not paid by any cellular health people either. I just actually think the more you look at it, it's really quite interesting. The bigger picture here is it's about foundational nutrition. So you need to get to the core of what enables people to live their lives. And the more that you do that, the more you will find that it will open up opportunities to a bigger audience. Now, people will search and think, what else can we add? You've got convenient food that does macro and micro. You've got AG1 or superfoods that does all the micros, etc. Where else do you go? That's the whole point. It will be right in front of our faces because the ecosystem is pretty stable, but someone will redefine and reimagine it. But within women's health, there'll be a foundational lens to it. Within sports nutrition, we'll go back to basics and there'll be a foundational approach to people reinventing stuff. You get to the foundation of health, you'll get to the core of what most people need to solve first, particularly if they're only going to have one or two products. So I'm just going to skip back because I don't think I summarized my slide at the very beginning, but I'm going to say that these are the things, and there'll be others, by the way. We're just really putting out some thoughts for stimulation, but these are the things that are going to define brands moving forward. But at an ingredient level, manufacturer level, or anybody else across the supply chain, they're things that you should be at the forefront of your thinking. The next generation of big innovation, next generation of brands are going to redefine and they're going to reimagine something. I think recovery becomes regeneration. I think aging becomes around cells. I think there's more things to redefine. Brands will own something and they'll become known for something because that's how you penetrate the market and then you grow from there. And over time, they'll have the challenge of how often do they innovate, but they have to own something to penetrate. But they will still own something and find a degree of holistic 360-degree health. And within that, the conversation will be breaking the taboo. They will have honesty and authenticity, and there'll be a central destination place that people believe are credible. And they'll build a platform beyond nutritional products, because if they don't, products don't become part of a repertoire and a habit. And that's going to be technology, hardware, software, and a few different permutations in between. Where people do create ownership, I think it's going to be around energy, which inherently also is, of course, the mind, but there's 4 areas of the brain. Agelessness, how do you emphasize the ability that people are doing something right for tomorrow? And within that, I think that's possibly linked to the impact of digitization, and they'll try to make it as foundational as possible. Now, to some extent, I've narrated that as if every single one links to the others. That's not strictly true. I think all trends are intrinsically linked, actually, in many ways. But really, these are different ways that people can move around the landscape of enhanced nutrition, active nutrition, whatever you want to call it, in 2024. And I think this is where a lot of people are going to start to win. And they're really going to probably combine one of those from the top with one of those from the bottom, or a mixture of therein, to find ways to win in the market. So look out for those. Redefine, reimagine, own something. Appreciate health is not one-dimensional. Have good conversations, build a product platform beyond nutrition, and then energy, brain, agelessness, the reversing of the impact of digitization and foundational nutrition is going to be key. So with that, I'm going to say, please feel free to ask any questions. Otherwise we can take that and send me any comments directly or otherwise. And I hope that sort of helps. But I'll give yourselves a minute or so to ask anything, but hopefully that gives you something to build on. For everyone who's joined the webinar, just so you know, we'll send out the slides. And for those who are customers on any platform, we will be able to put these slides on the platform, and you'll also have a much deeper presentation available soon. I do have a question. What are your thoughts on the hydration market in Europe? Liquid IV doing well in the US. Will this trend come to Europe? It kind of already is, in all honesty, because I suppose the healthy hydration is brought to life through the Waterdrop example. So you have got Waterdrop in Germany, which is effectively a greater than 100 million euro brand in less than 6 years. Liquid IV are acquired by Unilever and, from my knowledge, looking to launch in Europe as it stands at the moment. And so I think Waterdrop is already the example of a precedent that has made incredible ways of doing so. So that's something that I think is already happening. It's just not quite yet to the extent of the US. Another great question, how do you see the recovery space growing in the UK and Europe? I guess sports nutrition intrinsically is linked to, recovery is intrinsically linked to sports nutrition. I firmly believe in the proposition of daily recovery and daily regeneration, particularly as you're aging. So I think there'll be some people who look to redefine what recovery means to more people beyond the sporting and the acute occasion post-exercise. It can still be post-exercise, but I've always firmly believed that people who do endurance exercise don't look for recovery to like be as fast as possible the next day. They look or would want recovery for the purposes of the fact that they exercise to be healthier and the fact that they're aging. So I firmly believe in recovery and regeneration will be an evolution. Also, Human 24 recently launched an exact replica of LMNT. That's a link to the first question there about recovery. They did. And actually, it's a reminder that Human 24, which is based on brain and circadian rhythms, they're building a great portfolio, but they've also moved into healthy hydration. So to some extent, the first question, there's another example of people looking to copy Element, I think is how they want you to say it, but to me, LMNT, which is the another version of a liquid IV in one respect. Another question, how do you see the talks about ultra processed foods and health impact influence our nutrition in the future? I think it goes back to the way I framed this earlier in the year about people engineered naturalness. People want to see foods to be more natural, which I think is a good thing. But they will accept an aspect or an element of engineeredness because I don't think people expect things to come directly from the field. I really don't, or from wherever, from the plant. However, there comes a point when the level of processing will go beyond a level or a threshold where consumers will find it off-putting. And I think maybe that's sort of happened in the alternate meats type area, where I think people have looked in it and gone, that's maybe a little bit too far in terms of their perception of what looks and feels like it. So in that sense, I don't think there's a binary, they want it or they don't want it, or they accept it, they don't accept it. I don't think there's anything binary in our industry, i.e. yes or no. What you'll find is that there's a threshold for it. Exactly where the threshold is, I'm not sure, other than that there is definitely a point to which being ultra processed is a problem. The question is, what do people believe to be that threshold, or what do consumers understand as ultra processed, and how do they interpret it? Some of the simple wins for brands are to keep ingredient lists short and pronounceable in principle. That's not new, but I would say that still holds true today. 4 great questions, actually. Any more? Any more for any more? Not right now. Okay. For those of you asking questions, and for those of you on, I think I know most of you actually. So anyone who has any questions for me, just ask me directly. You can all do so, looking at who's on the call. No big problem. I'll send out the slides over the next few days. And for those of you on Annie, our proprietary platform, then you'll have a much more in-depth version on there for you to view shortly. With that, I wish you a wonderful Thursday afternoon or morning for those of you in the S, and we'll be in touch soon. So keep well, and you can all skedaddle.